A U.S. court just blew a hole wide open in Trump's tariffs plan. How is this going to affect you as a e-commerce seller? Well, specifically, as of yesterday, a U.S. court blocked most of the Trump tariffs with a specific ruling around his authority to impose certain tariffs. What exactly does this mean? Well, the U.S. Trade Court blocked most of the tariffs in a sweeping ruling on Wednesday that found the president overstepped his authority by imposing across the board duties on imports from U.S. trading partners. With this, as well, the judges ordered the Trump administration to issue new orders reflecting the permanent injunction within 10 days. The reasoning for this is that essentially they are saying he overstepped his bounds as a what he can actually do with specific acts. So for those that are unaware, the way he was imposing all of these tariffs was through the International Emergency Economic Powers Act that usually meant to address unusual and extraordinary threats during a national emergency. Trump's idea of a national emergency for this was specifically talking about how we have a trade deficit in the US, about $1.2 trillion worth of trade deficit. And so, with that, the point of the tariffs was to essentially levy all of this to decrease the overall trade, making other countries, purchase more goods from the US rather than the US purchasing from us. With this, however, we know that this is not exactly how it's working out for the average US seller and US consumer. As we have seen, the tariffs have gone everywhere across the board. Right now, we stand at about a 10% standard tariff across the board, with China being at about 30% with its additional 20% duties already on top of it. So, what does this really mean for you as a seller? Well, a couple of different things. So, we already know that most of the other countries, Europe, the entire European Union, and all of these other countries that you could import from had the 10% tariff, and it was just on a 90-day levy. And then China just recently got its levy down to 30% for a 90-day extension as well. Well, this entire thing could blow both of those out of the water. It could mean that they don't even exist in the first place and that you don't have to worry about them. But what does that really mean for people who have already been impacted by the tariffs? Plenty of sellers have had to purchase and import goods during this time and had to pay increased tariffs. I have talked to plenty as well, one of which who even had to pay roughly $270,000 on only $115,000 worth of inventory when they normally would have only paid around $40,000. So the tariffs have a massive effect on sellers. Here is my kind of current thought around this. My guess would be that more than likely we're going to be seeing a cashback incentive to those who paid the tariffs, but only if this ruling fully goes through and is not appealed. But as we already have seen, the Trump administration immediately put in an appeal yesterday after this ruling came through. And so we're not really going to have surefire information. But at the very least, it does put a bit of a stopgap in the meantime towards the current tariffs and any ability for them to raise new tariffs. And especially since Congress isn't super interested right now in the idea of actually making these tariffs into law in any way, shape, or form, I don't see this going anywhere within the next 90 days whatsoever. So, the next 90 days, at the very least, we are likely not to see a bunch of movement around this unless they really want to move this along. But the good thing with that being is that potentially in 90 days, a bunch of people are going to get a bunch of cash back for the imports that they already paid. On top of that, I'm expecting that this is going to levy and give a lot more flexibility to people's landed costs. We're going to be essentially back where we were 6 months ago for anybody looking to actually import goods, at least in the present moment. Now, that being said, we have seen some information, actually, some Goldman Sachs analysts noted that the order does not block sector-specific levies, and there were other legal avenues for Trump to impose across the board and country-specific tariffs. So that is one thing to keep note of, is the fact that the Trump administration could, in fact, still put tariffs on the board. They would just have to be a lot more tact in how they go about doing those tariffs. So this ruling represents a setback for the administration's tariffs plan, increase uncertainty, but might not change the final outcome for most major U.S. trading partners. The reason that analysts are saying this is because essentially what the ruling was used for is saying that the way the Trump administration imposed these cross the border tariffs, or across the entire board, I guess, tariffs, is that they did it in the wrong way. It's not saying fully that they can't do it, because they can. They have to do it in a way that is sector specific. They have to do it by specific category of good, and they have to do it through specific means. They can't just say X country, everything is going to have X tariff on it, which is essentially what the Trump administration did to be able to push this through exceptionally fast. Now, historically speaking, when looking at any sector specific tariff that any presidential candidate or administration wants to be pushing, they are looking at it takes a lot of time. Why? Because they have to look at every single specific industry, look at the current tariff cost, what the actual import costs are for that as well. And they actually have to put a specific amount towards that industry and towards that sector. However, again, the way that Trump administration did it is essentially just kind of said, screw you to everyone. So if you are trying to understand a little bit more how this is going to affect you, the aspect at the end of the day is that this will affect you in a couple of different ways. More than likely, everything is going back for at least the present moment to tariffs from about 6 months ago. So some countries did already have tariffs. South Korea, for instance, was at about I believe, a 13%, or 9% tariff from the 13% that they actually were. So that's one of those areas where you're back to 9%. It saves you about 4% right now as far as the actual tariff costs go. So it's going to be good if you were importing from somewhere like South Korea. Now, as far as future proofing yourself in this scenario, what should you as a seller do? Well, my first advice would be similar to my last tariff video, and that would be specifically order your inventory. Now is the perfect time. We know for a fact that this is going to be held up in the courts for at least the next couple of weeks, if not couple of months. So that means that you have a little bit of a reprieve as far as ordering inventory, understanding what your overall cost of goods is going to be. The biggest aspect with this that I would try and understand if I were you is make sure that you are fully prepped for the remainder of the year. This is going to take months for these appeals to go through. And again, it takes months for sector specific tariffs to take effect and to be put together. But I would not doubt that the Trump administration already starts that and they try to essentially say, hey, now we are going to put these sector specific tariffs together. So all of that being said, my biggest advice is this, as it has been always. Make sure you're loaded on inventory. If you can, order your inventory now. There is nothing that will help you more in this moment than making sure that you are stocked on inventory, and there is nothing that could be worse than getting, 3 months, 4 months out from now, not having your inventory ordered and suddenly being hit with tariffs yet again. So as a seller, I'm a bit happy about this. As far as how it will play out when it comes to the entirety of the U.S., I think we are yet to see that fully in action and what the U.S. plan is moving forward, or the administration's plan. As I said, there's already an appeal in place here, so we'll see. And as more news comes out, I will keep you posted.